I mean, this attack in Manchester is shocking, but it's not surprising. The writing was on the wall.
Anti-Semitism in Britain has exploded.
They identified who the threat was, and they shot him the first time. About a minute later, when he tried to get back up again, they shot him again.
Look, it's clear that there is an information war, a propaganda war that is being waged against Israel that seeks to depict it as a symbol of ultimate evil in the world.
Well, yes, I mean, Jihad, kind of ironic that that is his first name.
These people who were celebrating the death of Jews in your country, they were also celebrating Charlie Kirk's death as well.
So I think the British government has a great deal of responsibility here in not standing up vocally.
Hello, welcome to Harry Cole Saves the West, the show where American grit meets British backbone. Manchester, England, Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, turned to horror. A car ploughed into worshippers outside a synagogue, then the stabbing rampage began. 2 dead, and the terrorist Jihad Al-Shamie getting justice on the spot from the brave cops who ran towards the carnage. But British Jews had dreaded this day. Since Hamas's October 7th massacre, anti-Semitism in Britain has exploded. 4 incidents a day reported. There are synagogues like fortresses, kids bullied in schools, patients even refused treatment. Campuses are a no-go zone. Yet there was a crashing sense of inevitability about the scenes we saw unfold today. And while the left will defend every minority except the Jews, tonight they're back on the streets. If you ever doubt that Jews don't count has become a reality, then look at the scenes of spit-fleckled Hamas sympathisers raging across London, Manchester, Edinburgh and Birmingham this evening. And it's not just the UK. Here in Washington, chants of "globalise the intifada" echo around protests in squares. Well, enough is enough. This has to stop. But how do we do that? Tonight I'm going to be joined in the studio throughout this evening by the Free Beacon's John Levine. And we'll talk in a moment to Will Geddes, security expert. But first, John, this is the intifada globalised, right? This is what...
It's sad, Harry, because I just... How many times do we have to watch the same movie over and over and over again? And we've seen this in other parts of Europe. It really wasn't in England until relatively recently. And as you said, now there's 4 incidents a day happening in your country. And what makes it doubly sad is it's an entirely self-inflicted wound. I don't think Jihad was a long-term resident of the United Kingdom.
Well, he says a man of Syrian origin.
Syrian origin.
Is, you know, with the police, you never quite know how they word these things.
I don't think he came over with the Norman conquest.
Right.
And
yes.
So you have imported this highly destructive, dangerous population into your country. And I just checked before I arrived on the show, the Islamic population of the United Kingdom has doubled since the year 2000 to present day, and it's entirely they're brought in as migrants. And I don't know what possessed the United Kingdom to do this, except probably why the United States brings in foreign immigrants is because of labor considerations and all that, and big business wants cheap labor. But you have to think about what cost to your society this does, because if this continues, if this population continues to grow and you see these kind of attacks continue, it will fundamentally destroy your country.
Stay there. I'm going to speak to Will Geddes now, security expert. Will, are you there?
I'm here, Harry.
Good evening. Listen, talk us through how the day unfolded, and what the mood is like, the tension is like in the Jewish community this evening. Given the blunt nature, should we say, of this attack, meaning it's almost impossible to stop.
Yeah, so, I mean, really, let's take you through from the events and how they commenced today, Harry, and I'll give you a quick rundown. At about 9:31 this morning, there was a gathering, obviously, at this synagogue in Manchester. It's a prominent synagogue. There were a number of people there to celebrate Yom Kippur, which is obviously a major, major event for the Jewish community, and it's an event that they celebrate every year. And this individual turned up in a small vehicle, a Kia. He rammed one of the people outside, who was a security officer, as I believe. He then disembarked from the vehicle. He debussed with a knife and then started stabbing 4 individuals. 2 individuals have died as a consequence. The rabbi, amazingly, and his actions probably saved the vast majority of the congregation, who thankfully were already in the synagogue. He pulled the doors shut to prevent this individual from getting any further. About 4 minutes later, Harry, armed police turned up very rapidly. You couldn't ask for a faster response than that. Within a minute, they identified who the threat was, and they shot him the first time. About a minute later, when he tried to get back up again, they shot him again. Now, the individual was carrying, as we've seen before, on the London Bridge attack, for example, a fake suicide belt, which looked as though he had IEDs on him. They have now been determined as having been inert. And inevitably, there has been subsequent investigations. There have been 3 arrests, and there are 4 people currently in custody. Of the individuals that were targeted, the 2 that didn't die are currently being treated in emergency care right now. And as you mentioned, Harry, the individual has been named. He's of Syrian descent. They say he's a British national, but I would put some question marks over how long he's been a British national.
Well, he's not. He's not in any position to be suing right now. So let's talk about this guy. What else is there? Any other details we know about him beyond his extraordinary name? Should we say?
Well, yes. I mean, Jihad. Kind of ironic that is his first name. Very little is known right now. The authorities took their time to release it, and this name has only just come out, as you know, in the last few minutes as to naming the individual, because I think there will be consequences to the government in how they have been treating the whole situation, particularly, as you rightly said, Harry, with protests even going on tonight outside Downing Street by pro-Hamas supporters. And this is in the wake of our own Prime Minister turning round and stating that he recognised Palestine as a state. That is not playing into the hands of Hamas, if you could ask for it. I mean, it really is.
No, astonishing scenes across big cities and even small towns in the UK. They're saying it's about this flotilla that little Greta's been involved in again. But it's appalling. There's a big march planned on Saturday, I understand, through central London. Tens of thousands of these protesters, pro-Gaza, they like to put it euphemistically, protesters planning to take place. Why can the British government not just ban it?
Well, exactly. I mean, Palestine Action is one group that has been prescribed as a terrorist group. They're still out there. They're still proclaiming their individuals are still proclaiming their support, even though the penalty is that they could be incarcerated. But Harry, I don't know whether you saw the statement made by our esteemed London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, where he said he was going to do everything within his power to reassure the Jewish community, who understandably are very, very vulnerable right now and feeling very exposed. I think those words are empty, bearing in mind the number of pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas protests which are now still scheduled to carry on, as you say, this weekend.
Will Geddes, thank you for joining us on Harry Cole Saves the West. Astonishing there, John. The first reaction, I can't help but think, the death of Charlie Kirk 3 weeks ago, almost to the day, I believe. The outpouring of grief was through prayer. We saw those remarkable scenes in Arizona where it was more, it was a sort of very incredibly moving service. But people weren't taken to the streets and going violent. What is it about this movement in particular that seems to be so? I mean, the nicest way I can put it is that willfully blind to how they look. And the fact is, you think they'd have one night off, right, when people have just been murdered?
No, I mean, this is the ancient hatred. It goes back 5,000 years, and I think you're seeing only the most modern expression of that. And by the way, these people who are celebrating the death of Jews in your country, they were also celebrating Charlie Kirk's death as well. They might not have been as vocal about it, but Charlie was a friend to Israel. He was a friend to the government of Israel.
Well, let's talk to Eylon Levy, who I believe is joining us tonight from Israel, former government spokesman there. Good evening, Mr. Levy. Thank you for coming on this.
Good evening is one way of putting it, Harry.
Well, no, exactly. I was just going to say, not the circumstances. I tend to find we always end up speaking on days of grim news. But thank you for joining us. Jews around the world have celebrating Yom Kippur over today, and have been turning off their mobile phones and turning on the news this evening as the festival comes to an end. And what has the reaction been in Israel at this horrific attack?
I mean, this attack in Manchester is shocking, but it's not surprising. The writing was on the wall and everyone understood it was only a matter of time. It was only a matter of time because for decades, synagogues and Jewish schools across Europe have looked like fortresses with intense security around them. Communities are drilled with volunteers who stand outside on guard, because we've seen Islamic State specifically calling for attacks on Jews around the world, because Israel's own travel advice tells people if you go abroad, avoid showing any signs that you're Jewish, don't speak Hebrew, don't tell anyone where you're from. And the writing's been on the wall because we've seen protests around the world chanting, globalize the Intifada. Now, most people don't speak Arabic, but the Intifada was a wave of suicide bombings in Israel in the early 2000s. We've seen people on the streets of the West calling for political violence against Jews and Israelis, calling to import terrorism to the streets of the West. It's happened in the United States. We've had people killed. Now it's happening in the UK too. I can only hope the UK government gets its act together and understands the problem, so this will be the last and not the first.
Exactly, 2 people shot, I believe, in Washington not long ago, as you say, spreading across Europe as well. We've seen these kinds of attacks. The Israeli Foreign Minister tonight has had some strong words for the Labour government in Britain and the sort of mood music around the Jewish community that has become incredibly hostile. We've seen the scenes every weekend, every Saturday across Britain, these hate marches, which is what they are. And, you know, there was more controversy around someone calling them a hate march than the actual marches themselves. How does it look to from where you're sitting, that, you know, what has happened to London, what has happened to Washington, and what can be done about it? And are politicians to blame for creating this hostile environment?
Look, it's clear that there is an information war, a propaganda war that is being waged against Israel that seeks to depict it as a symbol of ultimate evil in the world. That's why they throw every nasty word in the rule book, genocide, starvation, apartheid, at Israel, to depict Israel as being like the new Nazi Germany. And if you depict Israel and anyone who is associated with it as uniquely evil, then you make violence to stop it not only acceptable, but moral. That is the purpose of the libels that have been launched against Israel and its supporters as it is fighting against Hamas and other Iranian proxy armies. It is a libel that is intended to make political violence against Jews and Israelis seem moral, seem noble. And that's why we're going to see people who are going to be praising this attacker as well, if they have the guts to say it out loud, because once Israel is seen as being the symbol of ultimate evil, and anyone who's associated with it, namely Jews, is seen as being complicit with evil, that lays the groundwork for political violence against them. That's why we need to hear the British government standing up more firmly against the crazy allegations being made against Israel as it's fighting against Hamas. Because when you allow those lies to get out of control, you legitimize political violence that has spilled blood on the streets of Britain.
How did it feel when you hear Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, say, "Oh, we're going to up security at synagogues"? Surely that horse has bolted, so to speak. The Brits were among a number of the countries to recognise the sort of state of, somehow recognise this mythical state of Palestine, despite it having no borders, no real population that you can actually define, and various other problems with it. Do you think what is the reaction to that, and can you draw a line in your view from directly from the response to recognising Palestine to the actions of today?
Look, an armed police presence is the last line of defense. It means that all the other defenses have fallen and you're really right at the last ditch. So that's not going to make many people feel comforted knowing that an armed guard outside is going to stop the attacks. We need to start much earlier. Look, let's look at one of the lies that is fueling hatred against Israel right now. The allegation that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza when it is fighting to bring down a terrorist regime that is literally threatening a genocide and that is still holding hostages in Gaza. We know that the outgoing Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, wrote a letter in which he said the British government's position is no, that's not what Israel is doing. That's ridiculous. Well, the British government needs to have the guts to say that out loud. While Israel is being accused of genocide shamefully at the ICJ, the British government needs to submit an amicus brief coming to Israel's defense and saying, no, this is ridiculous, and to say it vocally. Because when you allow those lies against Israel to spin out of control, then you allow people to feel that they are justified morally in using violence against either Israeli targets or Jewish targets. So I think the British government has a great deal of responsibility here in not standing up vocally and shutting down a lot of the information warfare and propaganda that has made the political atmosphere against Jews and Israelis absolutely toxic and has convinced many people, specifically on the left, that violence is justified morally in order to stop this.
Eylon, while I've got you, just on the broader developments we've seen this week with Prime Minister Netanyahu accepting the terms of fairly unpalatable terms, I'd say, of the Trump peace deal at the White House on Monday. Any sign of Hamas coming to the table? I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it, that people have been, these same people that are marching through the streets tonight have been calling for a ceasefire for 2 years, yet when the ceasefire is put on the table, they go, well, hang on, not that ceasefire, we don't want that one. What's the expectation of how it's going to play out? And in your view, are Hamas going to come to the table?
Right, isn't this crazy? It's the first so-called genocide in history that people don't actually want to end. And that's because they know it's a war, and it's a war that they want Hamas to win. But Israel has won this war. Hamas has lost, and the terms that President Trump has set out are terms to end the war with Hamas's surrender, okay? It's Hamas admitting that it's lost this war, and it should never have started it in the first place. Now, I hope that international pressure will be brought to bear on Hamas through its patrons, Qatar, Turkey, who will tell it, game over, there's nothing left to fight for. If you reject this deal, the US is going to back Israel in hunting you all the way in Gaza. But I think we need to be ready for the possibility that Hamas is going to say no, because it's a suicidal jihadi death cult. And if it says no to this term to end the war, then the UK government's position can't be pressure on Israel to end the war anyway, even if it leaves Hamas free to plot the next war, even if it leaves Hamas with hostages. The response has to be, we've said Hamas has to go, and we're going to stand firmly by Israel as it does the world's dirty work and does this the hard way, to remove Hamas so it can never again launch another war and drag the whole Middle East into another cycle of violence.
Eylon Levy, thank you for joining us tonight. And one day,
thank you, Harry.
We will have a conversation.
One day I'll come on
for big news. One day, yeah, exactly. Well, I hope so. Hope so soon. Stay safe.
One can dream.
Thanks,
Thanks, Harry.
It's remarkable there. I mean, it couldn't be clearer there, John Levine. It all but said, the British government has blood on its hands tonight.
I'll tell you, the current situation reminds me of an earlier unfortunate era of British history, the era of appeasement. And it's a word I keep coming back to because obviously... Very good point, well made. We see Keir Starmer recognizing a Palestinian state, which is not for any use of statecraft. It's entirely to appease restive domestic populations that have emerged in the UK in recent years. And as we saw from appeasement in the 30s, you don't actually arrest the problem, you embolden the evildoers. And I think you can draw a direct through line from this attack on this synagogue to recognizing a Palestinian state. And there will be more, and it will not just be in the United Kingdom.
Well, let's talk about the political ramifications for all of this. Lord Walney is joining us from London. He's a former independent advisor on political violence, expert on this sort of horrible days. Lord Walney, good evening. Extraordinary allegations there from Eylon Levy that the British government has basically got blood on their hands tonight. The climate around Israelis and Jews in Britain is pretty, it's pretty grim. I mean, not to sugarcoat it. Can I get your response to that?
Look, Eylon is right to highlight the level of distress that Jews in Britain and Israelis have with the current conduct of the UK and the West. And I really hope that this is a turning point, because I take absolutely as genuine that when Keir Starmer stands up, when Shabana Mahmood says that they will do whatever it takes to keep Jewish communities safe. And I know that they recognise and understand that in terms of physical security. And I know there will be another conversation now about what can be done to help keep British Jews safe, in the knowledge that I think has been tragically reinforced this morning that if you have a fanatic who has access to a car and a knife, then it is very hard for them to be able to be stopped. But the bigger question, I think, is the one that Eylon set out really eloquently there, which is, what are we doing as a government, as a country, in step by step turning away from Israel, making them out to be uniquely out of step and and putting them close to now being in pariah status in the international community. When look, there are terrible things that are happening in Gaza, and there's a valid conversation about whether Israel's action is proportionate. I know that if it had been us, if that massacre had happened on our shores and we had an existential threat next door, we'd be pretty tough.
Yeah.
But I recognise that question is there. But where we have taken this is now fueling the anti-Semitism.
Lord Walney, I think we both know what's going on here, though, don't we? Because if you look at what happened to the Labour Party at the last election, yes, it won, but a lot of its most senior cabinet ministers are hanging by a thread in their constituencies. They are seeing off Gaza independence and Muslim candidates who come very close to taking out politically some very senior members of the government. This is politics, isn't it? That's why the Israelis have been abandoned. That's why the government came in and made the sort of moves towards selling technology to Israel. It's why the BDS movement is allowed to grow in the UK. It's why you have former colleagues of yours in the Labour Party. Take Wes Streeting, for an example. He's been on a bit of a journey, hasn't he? He used to be one of the most pro-Israel voices in the Labour Party and in Parliament, and now he's pivoting to attacking Israel. And you know why? Because he's got a majority of less than 1,000 in his seat, and he's under threat from a pro-Gaza independent. This is raw politics, isn't it?
There is genuine distress about what's happening in Gaza. The raw political element that you talk about is clearly an important factor, and it is grubby and it is wrong and it needs to stop. But I think there is another factor here, and that is the scale of debasement, I would say, of the United Nations. Because when you are the Labour has come in and wanted to renew its the United Kingdom's activism within the UN as a political party on the centre left, that we love the idea of the United Nations. We really believe in it, and we thought that the Tories had done the wrong thing by setting themselves aside and by isolating themselves through Brexit. And so there is a current within the UN that you just cannot get on in that organisation.
Well, it's riddled with anti-Israel fanatics, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, these rapporteurs aren't exactly, people say, oh, it's a UN report, it can't be biased. It ranges from a talking shop to a extremely anti-Israel sort of movement.
Absolutely. It has been fundamentally changed, and there is different levels of countries basically playing the game. And I do think there is an element that that Keir Starmer and the Labour government is wanting to keep in with France and President Macron, and now he has his own domestic issues about needing to seem pro-Palestinian, and he wants to show leadership within the EU, and he has pushed this recognition deal, which does nothing to bring justice and a viable state for Palestine, but it shuts the UK and France out of negotiation, and it emboldens the extremists at home. And I hope now that there is a moment where actually my friends in the Labour Party, they don't want this. They do genuinely want to stop the hate and the persecution of Jewish people at home. I hope that this is a moment when they will actually listen and understand now what is happening here and are prepared to take course.
Lord Walney, a final question before I go. These scenes of these hate marches across the country, they're back tonight. There's a big one in London planned for Saturday. Do you think it should go ahead? And what can the government do to avoid looking like they're siding with the rights of people to put fear of God into Jews?
No, I don't think it should go ahead. The legal framework at the moment means that it probably can. What I think the government should do is accept the recommendation in my report, which is still sitting on their desk, and one of the recommendations is to allow the police and the Home Secretary to take into account the cumulative disruption to communities, to look at the way in which the Jewish community is being torn apart over a period of months, and certainly now is suffering, to be able to stop those marches.
John, Lord Walney, we're going to have to leave it there.